Melbourne is in the midst of preparing to be Australia's most populous city, but there aren't enough places to live.
We do need to deliver more housing, but it's really important that we don't sacrifice quality for quantity.
We had this sort of cultural idea that everyone lived on a block of land with a house and a backyard. I think it's gradually changing.
In a little over 7 years, the old marvellous Melbourne will have a population of over 6 million people. And the state is spending billions on building roads and rail, while also developing a plan on where to house the influx of people.
The big housing build is pretty much well and truly underway, but I think that the point is that at the same time as infrastructure spending by state governments is at a record high, do we have all of the labour and materials to then shift into a further big housing build? Probably not.
The government's answer to the housing shortfall was a pledge known as the Housing Statement and a promise to build 800,000 new homes in a decade. It'd be a mix of affordable, high-end and government housing, mostly in Melbourne.
The future is more housing supply for those who need it, and that's essentially everybody.
It was Daniel Andrews' last major announcement before his resignation, and it's considered one of the most ambitious housing plans in the country. But there are still major concerns over how it can be achieved. 730 has spoken to 3 industry insiders, an architect, a housing policy expert and an urban planner about the viability of Victoria's big housing promise.
Then they built these townhouses next to it.
We start with David Hayward, a policy expert from RMIT, who lives in a brand new housing development himself. He's highly sceptical of the plan to build 80,000 new homes every year.
Well, I was quite shocked when I saw that, because at the moment we're building around 55,000 a year, on average 55 to 60,000. To go from that to 80,000 with no explanation did surprise me. So I looked through the housing statement to work out how did they get there. And you know what? It's not explained.
The state government currently builds about 3 to 5% of Victoria's dwellings. David Hayward says the government is relying on private developers to build the homes. But right now, due to the cost of materials, a shortage of tradies and rising interest rates, there's little appetite from developers to build.
And if people don't have the income or the capacity to pay because interest rates are too high, their real incomes are falling, they're not going to get built. And it's one of the unspoken things in the statement. How are they going to match the gap between their ambitious targets and the reality of unaffordable housing? Builders are in it for the money, right? They're not doing it out of a public good.
Part of the government's plan to generate cash for affordable and social housing is a tax on Airbnbs.
Probably raise 70 million. In the order of things, that's not a lot of money. It's a drop in the ocean.
One of the major reforms within the housing statement is the promise to fast-track approvals for multi-million-dollar developments. Melbourne has been through phases of fast-track developments before, and some of those developments haven't worked out so well, according to our second expert, urban planner Leanne Hoddle.
About 5 years ago, there were 17 pools in Docklands, all within private developments, high-density developments, but you couldn't get access to a swimming lesson because it wasn't designed around creating a community where everyone came together to use a shared facility. It was about creating private amenity within each of those developments.
Leanne's concern is that mistakes of the past could be repeated, and barren, unwelcoming, concrete-filled communities might be a result of the housing statement.
If we focus just on supply and quantity, we won't get there. We really need to be thinking about the quality of living that the apartments are offering, but also what the quality of living in the neighbourhood is like.
More regulations are in place since Melbourne's most recent concrete communities were built, but restrictions may not be robust enough.
What's not clear is how we're going to deliver some of the more qualitative, I think, aspects. And there's some directions in the housing statement, but then how that quality is achieved, it's not quite clear yet how that's all going to fit together.
Our third expert, architect James Legg, is keen to explain to us that Melbourne should be looking to its long history of apartment building, of what to do and what not to do.
No one really realises that, yes, you can very quickly destroy a city as well and make it inhospitable to people to live in.
We start in the early 2000s and the infamously small apartments with limited windows, commonly known as dog boxes. Due to the new design laws brought in 2017, these apartments wouldn't likely be given planning approval by authorities today.
This is a good example of what I was talking about with borrowed light and ventilation. So this is a bedroom we're looking at here, and then that's the window out through the living room. If we look at the plan, here's the bedroom. If these doors are shut, there are no windows. Some of the worst of them, the tightest of them, were the 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom ones, which were specifically built for the investment market.
In the 1970s, developers built the so-called six-packs, low-rise apartments that James Legg says have some upside.
Often they look terrible, mainly I would argue because quite often the ground plane is completely covered in concrete for car parks. But you'll also, if you look around, you'll also see six-packs with great landscaping around them. The cars might be out the back and managed in a one particular car park, but then and the street access might be from one end, and then there's fully landscaped down the side, and that all of a sudden is a great outcome.
But James Legg believes Melbourne was once a leader in apartment building, and those designs hold up today. So let's go back even further. When were these built, and what are the benefits and the drawbacks?
These I would say would be between the wars. Melbourne has been building apartments, if you like, for decades and decades. And if you look at this, it feels like home. You've got a sense of arrival, you've got vegetation, there's ample light and ventilation to the rooms. I mean, I would never design something like this now, but a contemporary version of it, I would.
The Victorian government has told 7:30 it's confident it can deliver the housing stock and it will be high quality and community oriented. But experts we spoke to say the solution to the housing problem is, and always will be, a complicated one.
You start chasing the targets and you forget where you began to do this, which isn't just to build boxes. You want this city to be livable. You want Victoria to be a great place to live.
I think we should be really focusing on the types of neighbourhoods and livable spaces we want to create, and not just think a focus on supply should just mean we switch back to delivering lots of towers.
I don't think you can ensure that that all apartment buildings will be great, but we should be able to ensure that all apartment buildings are adequate and have good amenity.